The first 9 years of my relationship with Brian were not perfect, but they weren't bad enough for me to believe it was time to walk away. We had good moments mixed with difficult ones. I kept believing things would eventually get better. Brian was a truck driver, but he had a difficult time keeping a job. He would change jobs every 3 to 5 months, and when he wasn't working, I worked. We got together in October of 1997, and our life together quickly became a mixture of raising children, working, and trying to make things work. In April of 1998, I found out I was pregnant, and on December 20th of 1998, my son Dylan Ray was born. Just 10 days later, on December 30th, my mother's house caught on fire. Thankfully, she was able to escape with the help of a passerby. We had a trailer on our property, and her and my stepfather moved in. I found I was pregnant again in September of 1999. During the pregnancy, I was told I had precancer cells and would have to have a procedure done after birth. The procedure was called a cold knife cone biopsy. It involved removing a piece of my cervix. And so on April 13th of 2000, our son Noah Aaron was born. My grandfather had passed away in January, so we named him after him. In August of that year, I had the procedure done, and it was another frightening experience, but I made it through. In January of 2001, I was given an opportunity to take some classes in office management. I completed 6 out of 7 of the classes, but the final class required a diploma or a GED. So in March, I began the GED classes, while continuing doing the other classes. On May 10th of 2001, I got my GED. In June, I completed that last class for the office management. I was proud of myself because I had struggled for school for so much of my life. Earning my GED showed me that I could accomplish something I once thought was out of reach. After that, I tried college. I failed, and I quit. At the time, I did not realize that quitting would not be the end of my education. In December of 2003, we traveled to Florida because Brian's dad was sick. Sadly, he passed away on December 6th before we were able to reach his house. Then on December 29th, my mother died in a house fire on her 45th birthday. Losing my mother changed something inside me. My mother and I have been trying to find my sister before she passed. And when she passed, I deleted everything because I thought, what's the point? But somehow the story wasn't finished. On November 8th of 2004, I opened the window and yelled out, "Happy birthday, sister, wherever you are." 2 days later, I received an email that said they had information that matched my information. And I thought, I deleted everything. What could this possibly be? They asked me 10 questions, and I was able to answer 9. Based on my answers, they sent me an email saying it was a 99% match and gave me a name, an address, and a phone number. I panicked. I had no idea what I was going to say. I didn't know how she would feel, how she would react, or whether even she wanted to know me. But I reached out, and I'm glad I did. She had told me that it was a moment in her life where she needed somebody, and here I came. Sometimes life brings people together, at exactly the moment that we need them. In June of 2004, I found out that I was pregnant again. I miscarried July 4th. But in September, I found out that I was pregnant again. And my due date was May 10th. But Matthew, David, decided that he wanted to come out on April 16th of 2005. He was born 6 weeks early and spent 8 days in the NICU. Once again, I found myself facing the fear that comes with not knowing what is going to happen to your child. Brian and I got married on January 7th, 2006. Looking back, I could honestly say we should have stayed unmarried. On March 30th of 2006, I passed a test to become a school bus driver. There was a lady at church who asked me if I wanted to become a school bus driver. And all I said was, I can try. So, I did. I was a school bus driver for 18 years. Brian began getting Social Security in April and quit working. He spent all of his time in a room on a computer. He also told me that he was uncomfortable with himself and thought that he might be transgender. He asked me to help him. I had never dealt with anything like that before. I didn't know what to say or how to help. I did some research because I wanted to understand what he was going through. I wasn't trying to tell him what he should or should not do. I simply wanted to be a supportive spouse. I tried to stay out of it and let him figure it out for himself. Part of me wasn't sure if he genuinely was struggling with his identity or whether he was just testing my loyalty. In 2007, I was able to get my daughter back. I had a job, I had a family, I had a home, but the transition wasn't easy for her. She had grown up in a house with no other children, and suddenly she was living with 4 other children. Everything about her life had changed. Eventually, she had adjusted, but getting there was a journey for all of us. Around this time, another bus driver had told me to apply for a Habitat for Humanity house. Our house was small, it leaked, it was not suitable for a growing family. I was approved. Getting through the process wasn't easy. There were forms, requirements, paperwork, and more hoops to jump through than I ever imagined. But I kept going. I knew I was doing it for my children. In January of 2011, we finally moved into our Habitat for Humanity home. And after everything we had been through, having a safe place for my family felt like an incredible accomplishment. In August of 2008, I found out that I was pregnant again. At the time, I had a full-time bus route. So I called my boss with the news. In February, Dylan had fallen off of a swing at school at recess and had to be taken to the hospital. Both bones were broken and he needed surgery to have pins in it. After his cast was removed, he developed an infection and had to undergo another surgery. He was sent home with a PICC line and needed 6 weeks of treatment. I kept him home from school and arranged for a tutor to come out to keep up with his schoolwork. Dylan also suffered from lead poisoning as an infant, which then contributed to learning disabilities or difficulties. Watching him go through so much was difficult, but I did whatever I could to be there for him. I drove my bus route, and afterwards on Friday the 13th in March, Normally Friday nights were family nights. We would rent movies and order pizza, but that Friday ended very differently. Because of settling in for a quiet evening, I ended up having an emergency C-section. On March 14, 2009, our son, Tegan Anthony, was born 8 weeks premature. Because he needed specialized care, he was transferred to another hospital that had a NICU, and I stayed at the one where he was born. I was in a hospital with no baby. I was surrounded by empty rooms, and there were no other babies on the entire floor. I was scared, alone, and constantly wondering what was going to happen to my son. Tegan spent a month in the NICU. When he finally came home, he still needed a heart monitor for another 2 months. It was terrifying. By then, my marriage had started falling apart. I spent my days working. I drove the bus in the morning, worked in the cafeteria during the day, drove the bus in the afternoon, and then sometimes worked in the school at a sweeping position. I was exhausted, but I kept doing it because I wanted to provide a better home for my children. Brian's days looked very different. He spent most of his time in a room playing on a computer. He started a radio station, watched hours of different videos, experienced with hydroponic gardening, and came up with an idea to make biodiesel. One of his projects eventually resulted in our garage burning down. He constantly had a new dream or project, and I couldn't keep up with all of them. Eventually, I stopped trying. I stayed out of the way and concentrated on taking care of the house and the children. Even leaving the house had become an issue. If I went to the grocery or ran an errand, it wouldn't be long for Brian calling, asking when I would be home. The next town was 10 minutes away. I began to feel like I couldn't leave the house with having to explain myself. In 2012, I decided to try college again. This time I wanted to earn an associate's degree in accounting. Brian wasn't supportive. He told me I wasn't smart enough and I wouldn't be able to do it. Those words could have stopped me, especially considering my earlier struggles in school. But they didn't. I kept going. In May of 2014, I graduated. That diploma meant more to me than finishing college. It proved to me that I could do something I had once failed. I had struggled in school, earned my GED, quit college once, then found my way back. I finally finished, and during this time, my father was put into hospice in February of 2014. I stayed with him for several days so I could be close to him. Instead of supporting me through this time, Brian would call and ask why I was there and why I wasn't home. Even while I was losing my father, I felt like I had to defend where I was and what I was doing. Eventually, I asked Brian for a divorce. He refused. He told me that everything was in my head and I created my own drama. But I knew how I felt. I knew that our marriage was no longer going anywhere. In June of 2014, Brian asked me to quit my bus job and start pulling campers with him. I said no at first, but he kept pushing, and I eventually agreed. But I refused to completely quit my job. I went from full-time to part-time. At first, he did what he said he would do. Then slowly, I found myself doing it alone. I had known that this would happen. Alexa became pregnant, and she was 17, a senior in high school. Her baby was due in November, and by October, I refused to pull campers anymore. I told Brian that I wanted to return to my regular job and be closer to home. Alexa was going to finish school, and I was going to help her with the baby. She graduated in May. For years, I had tried to hold everything together. I worked, raised kids, went back to school, built a home, supported my family, and kept trying to make my marriage work. That was slowly becoming increasingly one-sided. And eventually, I had to admit something to myself. Wanting marriage to work isn't when only one person is fighting to save it. Brian and I finally divorced in October of 2016. It was the end of one chapter in my life, but it wasn't the end of me.